So welcome again. My name is Bev Atfield. I'm the Principal of Workplace Science at Jostle, and we're a tech company based in Vancouver. And we're really passionate about having conversations about all the things that impact people at work. And so together with the employee intranet that we're building as our product, we're also thinking about how to contribute knowledge and information around how to improve the experience that people have at work and how can we actually build better workplaces for everybody. So that's why we're having these conversations, and we have them every 2 weeks. This is our 6th one, and every time we have one of these events, I have 2 or 3 folks who help me guide the conversation. So our topic today is going to be focused on the most powerful connection between 2 people in the workplace, and that is through one-on-one meetings. And I'm delighted to have Dr. Kim Cameron and Jason Richmond, who are going to be helping me with the conversation today. So I'll pop up their information into the chat so that you can have that information if you'd like to grab it. I'm going to do that right now. And if you'd like to, you're welcome to pop your information into the chat for others to find out who you are and how they can reach you. And I also put my information in there if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn after the call, that would be great. So just a couple of housekeeping items. This is an open conversation. We're not going to be having extensive presentations. We will be having some activities, but the best way to contribute is just to unmute yourself and jump right in. You can also use the raise hand feature in Zoom, or you can physically raise your hand, wave at me or Jaden, who is also from Jostle, and she will be helping me navigate the call here today. So please participate in whatever capacity feels comfortable to you. We're going to be sharing a ton of information. We're going to be inviting group conversation, and hopefully we'll all leave here today understanding why one-on-ones are so important, take away some science-based information around why they're actually important for us to have in our relationships, and then just talk about some ways that we can actually improve one-on-ones as well. So that's enough from me. I'm really excited about this conversation, and thank you all for being here. So we're going to start with a broad question, just to get sort of the conversation flowing and get kind of loose. And I know we maybe have all just jumped into this call from meetings or other parts of our workday. So let's just start with a question around what is the purpose of one-on-one meetings for you or your organization? And I'm going to ask Jason if he can help us moderate this question. So Jason, I'll hand it over to you if you'd like to kick us off.
Sure. And again, it's fascinating because our lives have changed so much, and our one-on-one meetings have taken a different direction, possibly. So, and if you feel more comfortable throwing it in the chat, but I'd love to hear some voices. I mean, like Bev said, we all jumped on this call from being focused on something else. So, you know, this is an opportunity to engage ourselves into the next hour or so here that we have together about one-on-one meetings. So, you know, take a look at the last 3 months and the one-on-one meetings you have. What have they been about? Who'd like to share first? I mean, I know on my team, I have one-on-one meetings, you know, every 2 weeks, and it's usually, you know, it has a combination of things. One, it's about projects, current projects, and where we are on things. 2, we have an element a little bit about a performance, and then 3, we have a little bit about what's coming up, what's forecasted, what's going to be, you know, 2 weeks from now. So, I mean, it's a very structured thing, but those are what my one-on-ones are about. How about you guys? Or are you not having them at all?
I'll jump in, Jason. I think for me, the most important thing is it just simply comes down to it's personal. And there are sometimes things that you might want to say that to one person that you're not going to say in a group setting. So you can be much more honest and open and forthcoming. It's just a more easy, relaxing environment.
Sure. Okay.
I think for us, we just put in place a new performance review plan for our whole entire firm, and that includes 3 interlocking rituals that make up a performance review quarterly, and one of them is the weekly one-on-one. So we really just created a new agenda to follow for all of our managers to include everything you just said, but I think the biggest addition that we added was include a weekly mental health well-being check on all of your team members, include career development themes every single week, and the two-way feedback piece, and that's been really helpful.
Sure. And you touched upon something, that the two-way feedback piece. I'm fascinating. Has your organization been, would you say, very, very good at that and accepting of that? Has that been part of their culture, or is that an easy thing now going into a remote workforce, or maybe you've always been remote? I don't know your organization. I mean, is it new, or has it always been really accepting of two-way communications on one-on-ones?
It's newer. I just made it more of a kind of standard practice in our weekly one-on-ones. I think I had managers all over the spectrum, as I'm sure a lot of us did. Some managers were really good at it. Other managers were not even discussing two-way feedback until quarterly reviews. And so we're in that very early stage of like managers feeling comfortable on, it's now part of this agenda that we all follow. Like, it is a bullet point, everyone expects it. Like, you will talk about two-way feedback. And I think it's been welcomed by team members and an adjustment for managers. I mean, that's, I think, not an easy skill to develop.
Yeah. Okay. Who else on our call today would like to share a little bit about currently what's going on in their current world in regards to one-on-one conversations?
Carrie had unmuted a minute ago. Carrie, have you got something you want to say?
You're watching. I haven't really done one-on-ones with, say, my staff, but I have started in the past year with my VP. And my relationship with him has grown amazing. The communication is so much better. Myself, I feel heard. And now I'm just wanting to implement that in with my staff, because I want, clear communication, expectations, all of that good stuff. And so I seen this on, it was shared on LinkedIn, and I'm like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I thought I'd hop in and join today.
Carrie, how long ago did you and your VP start doing this? I mean, has this been a couple of weeks, or has this been 6 months?
You know what? Now I think I'm probably just before COVID.
Okay.
Started. Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's great results, though. I mean, it's great for you to realize the benefit, or to be able to see it and experience it. I mean, that's a leadership style right there, is to be able to take that what your experience is, and now want to bring that benefit down to your team. I guess in thinking about that, I don't know how big your team is, but if you were able to put some consistency to that, what do you think one of the two benefits of your team in regards to production or engagement or transparency or whatever it might be, what could be one or two big benefits for your close-knit team if you're able to really do that?
Just like, I think communication. I mean, I think everyone struggles with communication and how clear it is. And I can say something and someone else takes it however they take it. And so I just think the one-on-ones, and that's the time you can say, what did I say to you? So you can get, because I found I was getting constantly disappointed, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Am I not clear? What am I not doing? And I was talking and having time out, but it wasn't scheduled. It was kind of off the seat of your pants, and you weren't addressing everything. And one of the things that I do struggle with as well is like constructive criticism or giving any negative type of feedback. Yeah. So I feel like the communication part, I feel like it's been working for me and my VP, and that he hears and that I'm heard. And so I'm really looking forward to doing this with the staff so I can work on those things.
Bev, do we have time to hear from one more person? I think we do, don't we?
Absolutely. Yep. Keep going.
This is great. I love getting this input and hearing what you guys, what your real life is like.
I can share. Hi. I don't know if anyone's put their hand up. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah, just in case you're wondering where I am, I was walking and I thought I would be able to make it to the office, but I'm just at the beach. I just want to show you the beach really quickly, if that's okay.
And
this is just I love technology that I get to sit here and have this conversation with all of you on Zoom on my phone. So I just want to build upon what everyone's already saying about just the opportunity to connect with people, because connecting and being consistent obviously builds trust. And I love what Carrie said, that she feels seen and heard. And so for me, when I think about the one-on-one connection, it's about consistency, but it's the opportunity to build trust in that relationship. Because every time you show up on time, consistently, you're telling that person that they matter. And so for me, it's an opportunity to say to our people that you matter and you belong.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And that's so true. I mean, that's what we work in every day is, you know, when it gets to organizational culture and empowerment of people and engagement of people and letting them know that their voice matters, that they as a person matter, that their contributions are very important. You know, when COVID first hit and everyone pivoted and there was a lot of panic, you know, a lot of that went away because they supplemented that with happy hours and gatherings and things, but they lost a little bit of that. Okay, we still have to stay in business. We still have to work. We still have to produce, you know, and I think we're seeing it come full circle now where it's creating a new norm. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I think to that point, Jason, I think that maybe folks who weren't having as regular a check-in have maybe not necessarily in a formalized way, but they have necessarily increased their engagement with their team lead and maybe others who are their peers, which has had this effect of actually creating a reinforcement of some of the rituals and parts of culture that maybe weren't as expressed before, which I think is quite an interesting byproduct of our current situation. I can see that in the teams that we have at Jostle, and just finding ways to connect that have had to be a bit imaginative as well has maybe given us a fresh start almost with our one-on-ones. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but you know, having backgrounds like Laurie's gives you a bit of a fresh sort of go to the beach and have your one-on-one. Why not, right? So I think in terms of the purpose that one-on-ones are filling for us at Jostle is really just making sure that the connections are there. It doesn't really matter how they take place, as long as they are taking place, and using this opportunity to be a bit more creative with them perhaps is a refreshing thing I found. I don't know if anyone else can echo that sentiment.
Well, I think the personal connection is really important. But for me, I'm a one way or another a lifelong professional writer. So I like to think that I write clearly and succinctly and explain myself to people. But I've been amazed at the number of times, whether it's email, never mind texting, that you try and transmit a message to somebody and they don't get exactly what you're saying. So having a personal one-on-one just gives you that opportunity to, you know, clear the air and clarify your message, which you can't do, you know, in email or text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think to that point about the personal nature of this is we're all seeing inside each other's lives in ways that we've never done before. And we don't just have this facade of being at a boardroom table across from one another anymore in these one-on-ones. We're now coming at these meetings with, my husband just dropped some coffee up on my desk, which was amazing. And, you know, that would never have happened in the workplace. But this is the type of human stuff that's happening in the background now. And I think that has a wonderful element of just, we're all imperfect, we're all just here, and it makes it easier for us to show up with our vulnerabilities, with things that we're trying to work through. So I don't know, Jason, have you seen that with your customers and folks that you're coaching right now?
Absolutely. You know, my in all my work in culture, and Bev, you and I have talked about this. I talk a lot about authenticity and transparency. And I've got a colleague of mine, and you just said it, likes to use the word vulnerability or even intimacy, but with the remote workforce, with the one-on-ones, with the backgrounds, if you choose to use camera, I'm 100% in agreement. I think the level of authenticity from individual contributors through managers to executive leaders is coming out more and more and more. And it can't, because you're not hiding behind a boardroom. You're not hiding behind an oak wall, right? You're not, there's more elements of your life that's being seen and heard, for sure. And I think that's okay. I think it's a good thing to be a little bit more vulnerable, to be a little more authentic, to let people inside to understand what motivates you. From a manager leadership standpoint, I think it's your responsibility to take the time to find out what those things are for every individual person you lead.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Jason, for leading us through that opening conversation. And, you know, we talked about what the purpose of one-on-ones are, and we heard things like they're there to connect us. They give us that personal impact with others. They give us a channel to our manager or to our employees. But the main thing that I was hearing from our conversation was really about how this benefits us, and you know, the intentionality that Angie was talking about with the new structure that she's introduced with her team, and the benefits of you know, Kerry learning from her experience with her one-on-one, which is very new, and then wanting to take that down into her relationships with her team. All of these things are incredibly positive, and we know anecdotally that these, if done well and if done with intentionality, can serve us greatly in our relationships with people. But Kim, I'd love for you to take us through a short conversation around some of the science or the research basis for why we know these types of interactions are good for us. So perhaps I could hand it over to you to lead us through that conversation now.
Sure. Thank you, Viv. So I have been using a variation on one-on-one, so I'm going to explain what the variation is in a minute. I've been using this for 40 years or more. So I have used these with my children in our home. We have 7 children, had 7 children, they're all over the world now. I used them when I was coaching Little League basketball, Little League soccer, in community service, when I was the dean of a business school, when I'm running a research center with doctoral students. That is, the setting does not matter. It can be one-on-one when you're the boss, or it can be almost any other circumstance, situation, where the objectives that you want to achieve are important objectives. So I want to show you, I'm going to share my screen a minute and just show you 2 or 3 slides and maybe talk about the variation for a minute. So those are the ones. Can you see that all right? Whoops, I don't want that one yet. I want these. So in this research, we took intact teams. These are people working together. So for example, it would be a project team. It would be a department, a county department. It would be a consulting group. It would be a emergency room team with doctors and nurses and so on. So over on the right-hand side, you see and by the way, preface, sorry. What we did is when we measured performance of these teams. And the performance included a variety of different kinds of outcomes. It was productivity, it was the amount of trust, it was the efficiency of meetings when they rated those, it was quality of output, it was customer satisfaction, and so on. We collapsed all those performance dimensions into one line. So the red line, for example, what we did there is and the vertical axis is standardized score, so I'm not going to worry about that. We measured the performance of these teams, intact teams, groups, before any intervention occurred. Then we intervened, that is, we exposed them to this certain kind of one-on-one meeting. I refer to it as a sort of a positive management interview, but it doesn't matter what we call it. Anyway, these teams implemented, and what you see is performance scores. Performance scores go up. Then 3 months later, we measured them again and performance went up again, and then we lost that group. Okay, blue line, you see 4 teams, 37 folks. We measured their performance before anything happened. Then we intervened, exposed them to this one-on-one, I'll call it interview process, variation on a one-on-one. They implemented it. We measured them after they implemented it, and we followed these folks for 3 years. Performance goes up and stays up. All right, the dotted line, 6 teams. Here we measured them before, and they implemented, performance went up, and then they stopped. They simply said, we don't have time for this. We measured them 3 months after they stopped, performance had deteriorated. And then the black line are simply control groups. We didn't do anything with them. So the data is relatively convincing that this somehow makes a difference on output. Even more convincing is this data. 5 different teams essentially performing at about the same level across those multiple outcomes, doing similar kinds of work, not exactly the same. So again, we measured them before, this blue line. They implemented this process, performance goes up, then 6 months later, 12 months later, 18 months later, performance goes up and stays up. The dotted line, same thing, they implemented, then they stopped. We measured them 6 months after they stopped, 12 months after they stopped. Then we showed them the data. Look where you were, look where you are now. They said, okay, we'll implement. They implemented it, bingo, 6 months later, performance goes up. I mean, that's about as close to a controlled experiment as you can get in the field, per se. Now, to explain the differences between the normal one-on-one and what the variation I've been using for all these years. And by the way, before I go into this, let me give you a little bit of a preface. What I've discovered, especially in a professional setting, maybe also in a personal setting as well, is that the normal one-on-one meeting that is held bi-weekly or monthly, and by the way, I've never seen this work less frequently than once a month. I happen to hold them once a month. It's just, my cycle is a monthly cycle. It was when I was a dean, it's when I was running the research center and so on with the children. So it doesn't matter, and many people hold them much more frequently than that, but what I've discovered is that there needs to be a pre-meeting. I refer to it as a role negotiation meeting. The intent of that meeting, excuse me, goodness, is to, I'll get a drink of water, is to create psychological safety. That is, the whole point is to become very, very clear about the motive for these meetings. The motive is not appraisal. The motive is development and improvement. And importantly, clear agreements need to be reached regarding, for example, performance. I mean, what does it take to be acceptable in this organization, in this family, on this team, whatever? What's the performance level that is expected of me? And vice versa, as a leader, what's the expectation on your part? What are the criteria for success? What do I have to pay attention to? What data is collected? Who cares? I mean, what's the performance level? What does it take to exceed performance? What happens if I don't hit performance? What are the consequences of that? Another is, what kind of interpersonal relationships do we expect will be here? Can you be a curmudgeon and a hot dog and be fine, nobody cares? Or in my academic department, for example, we're very clear. We have 3 criteria we use to hire people. And this is going to sound really egotistical, but we're normally rated, my management department, normally rated as the #1 management department in the world. We publish more than other people. We have more fellows in the academy and all that stuff. But here's the key. The three criteria are, number one, you have to be a world-class scholar. That's a no-brainer. Everybody wants those in a research university. Number two is you have to be a good teacher. Again, no-brainer. Everybody wants good teachers. Number three is a differentiator. You have to be a net positive energizer. You have to add more positive energy to the system than you extract. So there's lots, I mean, there's a couple of hours to talk about with regard to what positive energy is, but in my department, we're very clear. We don't hire curmudgeons. We don't hire selfish, self-aggrandizing people who only care about themselves, who I want to make sure I'm famous, I don't care about you. None of those folks get taken seriously. We hire people who are committed to helping other people get better. I have 15 faculty members who have invested in my success, and I've made the same commitment. Okay, so part of this role negotiation session, the upfront meeting is, here's what we expect is going to be the culture of this organization. Here's the mission, here's the roles, but here's the non-discussables, the things that are below the surface. Let's get really clear, because I want you, or whoever I'm talking to, I want you to be as successful as you possibly can be. The motive of one-on-ones is to help you get better. All right, so that's the preface. There's always a one-time meeting. And that meeting, by the way, is not 10 minutes. It's not sending them off to HR for orientation or socialization or something. It's not taking them down to get their signatures on the forms. It is at least an hour meeting where we're seriously eyeball to eyeball helping each other get better and understanding what is expected of me. Okay, so this little matrix then shows the difference between the standard one-on-one meeting that gets published and frankly that gets talked about in a lot of training and consulting appointments or endeavors. So I want to take you through this just a little bit quickly. I'm sorry to do all this talking, Bev, but I'll do this quickly and then I'm going to stop talking.
Yep, sounds good.
So the intent of this meeting in a normal one-on-one is problem solving and correcting, you know, you're not doing so well, let me call you in and have this, meeting where I help you fix your behavior. The purpose of what I'm calling a personal management interview or a positive management interview, doesn't really matter what it's called. Let's just ignore the title for a minute. The intent of these meetings is that in every single meeting, we identify something that will get better. That is, the needle has to move. If we just hold a meeting to hold a meeting, gee, that felt good, or thanks for the information, that's not good enough. One of the most important intents is let's make sure something gets better. So it takes a certain amount of preparation in advance. What are we going to work on? It's always positive progress. If we just solve a problem and get rid of something negative, that's fine, but there ought to be something positive we're reaching toward. And it's also a meeting where both of us maintain accountability. That is, I'm accountable for getting better before next week. The other person, I'll call that person a direct report. That direct report is also accountable for improvement. All right, that's the purpose. The focus in most one-on-ones is problem solving. I'm calling deficit gaps. That is, what are we not doing so well? What's not going as well as we want? What targets haven't we hit? What people have been dissatisfied? Let's make sure we satisfy them. That's fine. But these meetings not only focus on deficits or problems or difficulties, but they also, in my work on positive leadership, I talk about abundance gaps. That's the difference between doing fine, acceptable work and doing extraordinary, spectacular work. So I want to give you a quick example, another side trip. So think of a continuum. On the left-hand side is anchored by negative problems. Middle is absent problems. Right-hand side is spectacular, extraordinary, unpredictable success. Think of physical health. 90% of all medical research focuses on the gap between the left-hand side and the middle. Illness, got the flu, got diabetes, or got COVID, 90% of all medical science is trying to close that gap. That is, get us from ill to absent illness. I mean, as soon as I'm healthy, I go to physical exam once a year, but that's not why medical science exists if I'm healthy. I think about the difference in between the middle, absent disease, and the right-hand side, which is extraordinary, spectacular health, which is Olympic fitness levels. It's the ability to walk around the beach all day and never get winded. I mean, Laura Lee. Or 5% body fat for men, 15% body fat for women. I mean, the ability to do 400 push-ups. I mean, that's extraordinary, spectacular physical health. Okay, well, organizations, when they're extraordinarily successful, I refer to that as a virtuous condition. That is, the best of the human condition is a virtuous state. If the world was virtuous, everybody'd be well educated, no poverty, no war. It'd be the best we can imagine. Okay, how do you go from we're fine, acceptable, everybody's satisfied, to holy cow, this is extraordinary? All right, that's an abundance gap. So the focus of these meetings is not only normal problem solving, but is how do we get to the place, one CEO said, beyond all understanding, nobody can understand how we got this good, but it's because we're focusing on that dynamic. All right, who sets the agenda? Normally, it's the leader. Primarily, send out an agenda. Here's what we're going to talk about. Come to my office. In this sort of positive approach, it's both of us. We both show up with an agenda. That means both of us prepare. I always handle their agenda items first, and we always get to mine. And once people get used to this, hardly ever, I mean, literally hardly ever do people show up without agenda items. They want to make sure things get better, and we're holding each other accountable and so on. So accountability, both of us are accountable for improvement. Both of us are accountable to one another for the agreements we made. And then the result is, in the normal one-on-one, okay, we got back, we're normal, we're fine. I'm not unhappy, and it's nice to meet. And in fact, it's even nice to have a warm, authentic, a warm, connecting sort of experience together. This other way to think about one-on-ones is we're trying to get spectacular. We're trying to get from where we are to someplace the best in the industry, or whatever, capitalize the heliotropic effect. I'm not going to worry about that. Let's not go into that. Okay, so that is the science. When this right-hand side gets pursued, and that's essentially what this data shows. When you pursue that approach to these one-on-one meetings, bingo, performance goes up significantly, and it stays up. Okay, I'll skip that slide. So back to you, Bev.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah.
So what I'm loving about what I just saw was the evolution of one-on-ones to this higher state of being and this amazing benefit that we can all reap from doing these one-on-one engagements. But we know, if you're making a very clear case, that performance can be impacted significantly in some cases by these types of meetings. But what I'd love to do is broaden the conversation a bit around, it's not just about performance, it's about how lives and workplaces are impacted by doing these types of meetings well and creating these relationships that actually have meaning to help us get to that elevated state or that evolved state of these engagements. So Jason, I'd like to ask you to weigh in here around how are workplaces impacted positively by managers and employees having these meetings that are actually quality conversations together? What happens in workplaces when that's going well?
Well, I mean, and Kim, obviously you're right. The performance goes up, but the level of trust within your organization.
Jason, can't hear you either. There must be a mute on. It doesn't look like you're muted, but we couldn't hear the sound.
You can't hear me?
It's very low.
Oh, that's strange. Still can't hear me. Huh. Microphone. Should be good.
I would like, while we're getting Jason, I would like to have some of our participants talk about the rules of thumb they use that ensures success. That is, some people say, well, I have to have them consistently. I can never miss them, or something. Are there any keys that you use that would be helpful to us? I mean, I've shared 2 or 3, for example, for me, but what else? What makes them work? And the reason I ask that question, more often than not, one-on-ones peter out. I have a CEO friend, excuse me, who has been holding these now for 5 years, once a month. And he regularly checks, are we still getting value? Are you still energized by these? Are we still making progress? And he said overwhelmingly, now this is a CEO and a C-suite person, but he said overwhelmingly, people say we cannot give these up. We have to. Similar in a healthcare organization where the head of nursing in a hospital said, I don't know what would happen if we were not holding these one-on-ones with my nurses. So what else occurs in your lives or in your one-on-ones?
Yeah, thanks for seeding that question, Kim. I think for me, it's about individual needs and making sure that the one-on-ones are set up for success necessarily by at the interval that suits both parties, particularly the employee, allowing them to be equal participants in the process, allowing them to own much of the process, and so that their needs are satisfied through it, not you dictating as the manager what the meeting should be for.
And
also,
you still can't hear me?
Yeah, no, you're back.
I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. Fabulous.
All right. So
go for it, Jason.
But what I was saying, to answer your question, that the level of trust within organizations go up significantly. And just to give you an example, and Kim, I don't know if you can pull that grid back up, but in all my work and working with all different levels of leadership, and the last grid that Kim had shared with kind of the old school way of doing things and the new way that we should be doing things. Go down a couple, yeah, the last grid you shared. Nope, yep, right there. When I look at that from a leadership standpoint, and Bev, you asked what's going on in the world today, I think the way we lead is ultimately has to change, and it has to evolve. And there is a tendency, there has been in the tendency, or in a typical one-on-one meeting, the tendency from a leadership perspective is that these meetings are in my interest. When I look at the far right-hand column, and I view this from a leadership perspective, these meetings are in the other person's interest. And with the one-on-ones and what I'm seeing in organizational culture, with some of the pivotal shifts, is people's leadership styles are changing from their interest to their employees' interest. And that's not an easy task for a lot of leaders to do. You have things like ego that gets in the way. You have things like history. You have things of, we don't do that around here. We've never done it that way before. And I would be fascinated to hear from anyone in the group, just looking at that grid, old versus new, or what should be new. What would you see some of the benefits of that? And the big one that was sticking out and jumped out at me is the fact that we're asking leaders now to be more interested in their people than they are in themselves. And Bev, to answer your question, over where we're at and the world we're in and a world transparency, I'm seeing that particular expectations out of corporate leadership more so than ever before.
Yeah, I think you raise an interesting point there. While others are sort of gathering their thoughts about how to jump in to respond, Jason, I think there's a selflessness and a self-awareness that has grown over the last few months, where those companies who are going to succeed in the new world of work are those ones that are necessarily sensitive to and respectful of others. And it's not necessarily about the power center driving the business any longer.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's just even accountability, right? The way we're supposed to be leading and supposed to be having our one-on-ones. Kim's first word there is both leader and employee are accountable to improve. You know, we've all been in meetings before where we've had a manager or a leader about metrics or numbers, and the question is, well, what are you going to do about it? Right? Not are we going to do about it. So whose interest is that manager living in? Right? And what kind of motivation goes with that? I'm seeing a higher level of trust. I'm even seeing a higher level of individual contributor interest. I'm seeing a higher level of engagement just by focusing on a program, a consistent effort in having meetings like these.
You know, I have a good friend who said, my first question always is something like, what do you need to have me, what do you need me to do to be a better leader? Or how can I be a better leader to help us or you or the organization get to where we want to go? That is, first question, how can I help, essentially?
Yep.
yeah, I think you raise an interesting point about the use of powerful questions in these meetings. And it's one thing to ask questions of the other person around what you can do, but the key is that you need to be prepared to respond and actually act on what is asked of you by the other party. And I think that's another big change that we're seeing is this duality and this call to action that must happen in organizations by leaders.
Yeah, and Lori just put a comment in the chat, Bev, and I can't agree with you more. It does take pressure off the leader, you know, thinking they have to have all the answers, right? And in today's workforce, in today's remote workforce, and in the world we live in today, the workforce has changed, and so our leadership style has to change in the same way. It's not so much that I know every answer, but it's more important that I know where or how to get the answer or support people in getting the answer, right? From a leadership standpoint. So Lori, I can't agree with you more. It's impossible for everybody to have all the answers. And now you're working more in a collaborative environment, and that's driving performance ultimately.
So I had one more thought just around, you know, we started this conversation around the purpose of these one-on-ones and what do they actually mean to you and to your organization. And something that I've seen as a bit of a trap that people fall into is using these meetings for status updates or task or project conversations. So Jason, maybe you could just share your thoughts on like, how do we help lift ourselves up out of those status updates and into the real meaning of these conversations? And Kim, if you'd like to weigh in from your perspective too.
Right.
Yeah, and again, I think there's always going to be an element of, I mean, in our own communications, I mean, you're always going to have a little bit of that status update and things like that. But my recommendation, what I've been working with organizations, with leaderships is every agenda, every meeting you have, because you don't see these people. You can't see what their emotions, you can't see their reactions. Incorporate some element of that that conversation to something important to them, more so than just the work. And I think that's a key characteristic to every one-on-one you have. Include, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but include something of interest or important to the person you're meeting with that might be outside the rest of the conversation. Does that make sense? I mean, that's just a recommendation off the top of my head. I've been working with a lot of people in that recently, actually. Because you can get in a rut. Every one-on-one becomes the same conversation, and you don't want that to happen.
Right.
Absolutely. How about you, Kim? What are you seeing?
Well, one of the most important goals of this kind of a one-on-one meeting, excuse me, as Jason has said, is for personal development, to have people feel like they're cared about, to feel like they can, flourish, and that they have an opportunity to contribute in a meaningful way. Once that occurs, once they know you have their best interests at heart, once they know that you're on their side, even when they mess up. I mean, children, once you correct them, don't say, okay, I'm finished with you, I'm declaring independence, right? I mean, they don't do that, because we correct, foster better improvement in a way we treat people. Well, that sort of motive can be duplicated in the workplace. So I was holding an interview with something like this with a person who was reporting to me. And we had been holding these for a couple of years, probably. High trust, vulnerability, all those things. 10 minutes into the interview, she said to me, look, I know we've got things we got to talk about, but I just got to talk to you about something. I'm just completely sidetracked, and I can't think of anything except what's going on in my life. And it's very personal, and I just got to talk to somebody. She said, I can't talk to my husband about this. I can't talk to my children about this. I can't even talk to my parents about this. I can't talk to my best friend about this. So I don't know what else to do, but can I talk to you about this really important issue? I said, of course. Now, let me stop there. What that meant is we had created a foundation where it was legitimate. It was appropriate to have her share, probably at that moment, the single most important thing going on in her life. So she had that kind of confidence. She said to me, I discovered yesterday that my husband is having an affair with my best friend. And I don't know if I ever want to talk to him again. I'm certainly not going to talk to my best friend. If I tell my parents, they'll kill him. If I talk to my children, they'll be devastated. And I mean, I just have to talk to you about this. Can I talk to you about this? Now, look, I'm not a therapist, but I can reflect and I can empathize and so on. I mean, I know a little bit about that. But the whole point of that was these kind of meetings certainly help the organization get better. I mean, one of the whole points is bottom line performance goes up. Otherwise, people say, look, I don't have time for this, frankly. I mean, I'm accountable for real bottom line results. And look, Cameron, not one-on-ones are fine, but hey, look, I don't have time. That's also a common reaction until they say that, you know what, things will in fact improve markedly and on criteria for which you're held responsible. And, excuse me, individuals themselves tend to flourish more than otherwise. I mean, I just think both things happen. Bottom line results, individuals feel valued, all the stuff that Gallup engagement survey, assesses, plus the kinds of things that you want to have happen in the world's best, we're the best there is at something. So anyway, Jason started out vulnerability, trust, high commitment to one another. Boy, that's the foundation.
Kim jumped in before he went back and talked about that almost pre-meeting to one-on-ones. Don't forget, everybody, this is behavior change, right? This is behavior change on both parties' part, the individual contributor, the leader, the manager, so forth. So at times you will get into situations where in the past, things like this could have come across as flavor of the month or lip service. But from an individual contributor or having these with your manager, your leader, you might have to be willing to invest time to allow that leader and manager to really change and not prejudge. If you're on the leadership side of it and you're working with your teams on these things, you need to step up and follow through on this. You don't want to schedule these and then keep canceling them. You don't want to have these conversations and do nothing with it, right? This is This is a tool, a vehicle to be used to build trust, to build engagement, to build performance. But if it's not used correctly, it'll strip it down. Does that resonate? I mean, I bet you we've all been thinking about situations, managers, leaders we've had in the past. And we're like, that person's not going to do this anyway. There's got to be commitment on the end of this too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love where both, Jason, where both you and Kim have arrived at is this bringing us back to the individual level. And it really is up to each of us to conduct these meetings in a way that, we declare what we want from them, but we also need to be prepared to change and to adapt and to understand and be more empathetic to what the other person might need from those conversations. So we've got a few more minutes here, and I thought we would do something a little bit fun to end off the hour here, to keep us in this realm of the individual responsibility, so that when we leave the call, we all have something to think about that we can change now for ourselves and for others. So I'm going to share a link into the chat. And it's going to be to a Jamboard. I don't know if anyone has used the Jamboard before, but if I will also share my screen. And what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly brainstorm for 4 or 5 minutes around how do one-on-ones currently feel for you. So I'm going to share my screen. I'll bring up the Jamboard here. And if you'd like to all go to the link that I just shared in the chat, that'll give you the ability to get into the Jamboard. And let's just take a minute or two, and if everyone wants to grab the little sticky notes, you just do that by clicking on the left there and typing in your thoughts. How do your one-on-ones feel right now? So let's do that for a couple of minutes. If you want to start adding some stickies in there, that'll be great. And this will be totally anonymous too, so feel free to just throw your thoughts in there. Okay, we'll just take another 30 seconds to add a few more ideas there.
While you're finishing up, I love that comment about, your one-on-ones with your kids have been the most impactful experience for building relationships. It is amazing how, we learn so much from our parents growing up, have children, then we start learning from our children. It's fascinating. It's great.
I don't mean to compare children to dogs, but I've learned a lot from my dogs. They've taught me a lot about relationships and the quality of relationships and living in the now and being focused and vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is great. We're seeing some really interesting things pop up here. Definitely seeing the pinch that we're feeling a little bit around being remote, and it feels a bit awkward and distant. Some folks are saying useful and meaningful, which is amazing to see. I mean, obviously that's what we'd hope these meetings would do for us. But Jason, Kim, I'm going to ask you each to just take a minute, and this will be sort of our closing thoughts around the session here today. But what's really jumping out at both of you from the ideas that have been shared?
The thing that jumps out at me right now while I'm reading these is honest, right? I mean, these are honest answers to a real question. And in my world, you know, going into one-on-one meetings, dealing with organizational change. I don't know what industries and organizations you're all from, but there is potential. There's an element. There could be a potential element of career fear in your mindset right now or in the future. And I say all that because, you know, getting together for 57 minutes and having this and answering a question with just upfront honesty is a trait that you can take that'll serve you well in going into organizational change, one-on-one meetings, those types of things. And that reading those, that's Bev, that's what's jumped out at me.
Excellent. Thank you. How about you, Kim?
I'm struck, Bev, by 2 or 3 of the yeah, but statements. And if you don't mind, I might share a slide. In 2 minutes, I would like to respond to a couple of those. Yeah, but we always revert back to projects. Some people are more engaged than others. We don't know what to cover. Sometimes we run out of topics, and so on. Can I share my slide with you?
Absolutely.
Slide. Where is it? Here is, whoops, come back. Here is one of only about 4 or 5 slides that I sometimes use to explain what we're talking about. But, you know, on the left-hand side, you see the major goals are continuous improvement and feedback and so on. We always follow up on action items. It's not a 10-minute meeting, it's a long meeting. The right-hand side is what I want to focus on. Here are examples of the kind of items I use. I'm just responding to the 2 or 3 of you who've said we run out of ideas or we always go back to projects, or, you know, it's not interpersonal at all. So organization and job issues, of course, that's the whole point. There's always sometimes information sharing, but not much. And the reason is you can share information in a whole lot of other ways. Third is there's always, at least I try to make sure there's always some kind of training or development. How can I help you get better? I mean, think about children. This month, let's work on something together. Let's see, you know, how we can have you take a step forward. So with employees, if I know them well enough, let's spend a certain amount of time having me help coach or mentor you. Resource needs, you don't have to wait until the end of the budget year to get what you need. Nobody fails because they can't get what they need. So I often ask, if we're not hitting numbers, if we're not on target, if we're not making progress, what's wrong? Let's figure out a way. What do you need? Interpersonal issues are ubiquitous. They're always present. So we try to handle them before they get to be explosions. What's going on, how you feel, and who you getting along with, who's struggling, and so on. You know, obstacles for improvement, what's getting in the way, how come we're not as fast as we were last year, or whatever. And of course, targets and goals, I mean, that's the default. But then I always spend a bit of time, and one of you mentioned this, about career aspirations. What do you want to do? Let me help you get there. Do you want to move up to be executive vice president? Is this a job temporarily just to pay off student loans or whatever? Let me see if I can help you make progress. Then appraisal and feedback. The root of the word appraisal is praise. So I always have opportunities to congratulate, identify their strengths. What are you doing that's making an important contribution? And then it's 2-way feedback, not just 1-way feedback. And then I always make it available to handle some kind of personal issues. All right, now the reason I mention that, that's not a comprehensive list by any means, but it may give you a few hints about how you can move through this interview without just defaulting back to, well, what's the numbers we've got to hit this week? All right.
Thanks, Kim. I am going to have to stop you there. We are over our hour, and you know, the reality is that there's just so much depth here, and there's so much that we can talk about. But I think we've done a good job of dipping our toes in and really helping everybody understand that there is a scientific basis for this. There are obviously benefits that we feel at the individual and the organizational level. There is, you know, so much that we can do to improve these conversations, and I'm so grateful that we've had this time together, and I hope this is just the first of many conversations amongst the folks who are here today. So feel free to connect with one another. We will share the recording, so you will be able to refer back to the slides that Kim shared, and do reach out to Jason or Kim if you have any other questions or if you'd like to continue the conversation. So thank you very much. Please join us again on October 15th, where Laurie Cochera, who is on the call here today, is actually going to be leading the conversation with us. She is going to be joining us to talk about how conversation creates inclusion, belonging, and engagement at work. Oh, that's a mouthful. So we're going to have a lot to talk about on the 15th, and I've just really enjoyed the time together and the contributions and the openness and honesty today. So thanks, everyone, and be well and safe wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bev, and thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks
Cheers.
a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Bev. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.